for attending. It's a deep honor to be able to participate in this conference. Ever since I've started to study various Taoist texts of different periods of Far Eastern history from a comparative religious point of view, and parallel to it, the related studies of modern scholars, I've always felt that something important is missed in our modern understanding of the tradition. When I come across the writings of Liu Yiming, I began to find what this deficiency is. I found out as an important qualification for studying the work of the Taoist masters of the past, we actually need their symbolist mentality, and it is the matter that is strongly insisted by Liu Yiming. This 18th century Taoist master has written two books, particularly on symbolism from a Taoist alchemical point of view. The Notes on Realizing Tao, Hu Dao Lu, and Eliminating Doubts on Symbolical Terminology, Xiangyin Po Yi. However, almost all of his work are mainly concerned with elucidating various symbols employed in the ancient classics and alchemical Taoist books. These include his commentaries on the I Ching. He has written 6 commentaries or more on the I Ching, of which only 2 are included in the famous collection, the 12 kinds of the Taoist books. And also his commentaries on the Cantung Qi, Wu Junpian, the famous history of the journey to the West, Xiao Ji, and so on. In fact, he thinks that understanding symbols are one of the most important steps to realizing Tao. He has also written a beautifully designed treatise in which he has explained architectural symbols regarding the Taoist self-cultivation. The book is named The 8 Methods of the Spiritual Abode, Shen Shi Bao Feng. Liu Yiming's understanding of symbolism is based on this doctrine that everything is an epiphany of Taoist Qi fusing through the hierarchical realms of manifestation, from the prior heaven to the posterior heaven, that is from the pre-eternity to the temporally and spatially conditioned world. Since Tao is present in the core of everything, each being existentially denotes a reality belonging to a higher level, higher and higher, until one reaches the essence, the quiddity of Tao. Symbols are not horizontally in a row with words. I mean, they belong not to the gross formal level, unlike words and speech, but symbols are vertically higher, belonging to an entirely different level of existence. Symbolism is envisaged as a bridge between the realm of language and the realm of formless ideas. Or we can say symbolism is a ladder which helps one to ascend from the domain of language or forms to the domain of subtle forms, and then the formless state. If here is the realm of gross forms, and here is the formless realm, symbols as imaginal entities of the imaginational world belong indeed to this state of being, the subtle formal manifestation. And I'm talking about the core essence of symbols, not their manifestation, be it their lingual manifestation, narrative, geometric, artistic, natural, or whatever. Therefore, symbols have a peculiar ontological quality transcending the lingual conditions. This is exactly what makes a symbol different from a mere sign, allegory, or metaphor. When we think of a mountain as a metaphor of, for example, an individual king, there is no objectively established link between the two. Their conceptual association cannot be found anywhere outside the realm of language and a human mind or a collective of human minds. However, when the sun is presented as a symbol of consciousness, their association is ontologically principled, because the symbol of the sun, which is nothing but the essence of the sun, is itself a universal manifestation of consciousness in the subtle state. Liu Yiming, in his opening lines of the preface on his book, Udalu, The Notes on Realizing Tao, writes, on account of Tao's immanence in the universe, there is no creature who doesn't possess it, and there is no place where it is not present. In the above, sun, moon, stars, constellations, thunderbolt, rain. In the below, mountains, rivers, plants, trees, birds, animals, and humans. All unmoving and moving creature comprise the human. Among all the sentient and non-sentient beings, there is none upon which the breath of Tao is not exercised. Tao is before our eyes, but most people do not examine deeply. For Liu Yiming, the necessity of interpreting symbols also entails a certain traditional Eastern doctrine. According to the doctrine of cyclical movement of time, in the current phase of history, an increasing intellectual and spiritual degeneration is happening in humanity. Because of it, scholars of later ages are mostly unable to understand symbols employed in the ancient writings and teachings. Indeed, symbolism were the natural way of communicating esoteric teachings rooted in the I Ching and continued in the Taoist internal alchemy, began with Wei Boyang's Cantung Qi. Later, as scholar practitioners gradually lost their symbolist vision. Taking symbols in their most external sense, the scholars fell themselves into the trap of symbols, the trap that were at first supposed to hunt the rabbits of meanings, the rabbits of ideas, to use a famous parable first coined by Wang Bi, who lived in the 3rd century CE. The non-symbolist outlook of the scholars who study the golden alchemy is a huge obstacle on the way to realizing Tao. When Liu Yiming interprets symbols, he is actually looking for a solution for this problem of the scholars, which is of course a symptom of removal from the golden age, the age when the spontaneous symbolist mentality was predominant everywhere. Among the people who study Taoism in general, some possess the symbolist mentality, while others are either ignorant of the symbolical nature of the Taoist teachings or refute it. The upright way of Taoist path is to possess the symbolist mind, whether it is spontaneous or instructional. The true symbolist perception or intuitive perception of symbols is to see their true form once you come across them. True form for Zhenxing. People of far antiquity in the golden age were blessed with this spontaneous perception, a sight, a vision that penetrates into the nature of things. In later ages, only those who have kept this sight have the ability to perceive symbols spontaneously. Also, understanding symbols can be instructed. This is an indirect perception. The problem of this understanding is that one can only grasp those particular aspects or orientations of a symbol that are learned. Therefore, he or she cannot interpret symbols only by relying on his or her speculative faculty. Nonetheless, a sharp intelligence is always an important means to interpret symbols. Other ways are considered as side gates, the most of which are diabolical methods, Xirshu, of misinterpreting alchemical symbols in an inverted way through a misapplication of twofold meanings of symbols. Followers of these diabolical methods try to understand symbols according to their own bewildered psychical states or the demonic indoctrinations that are increasingly spreading in the course of history, and in our time, they must be more than ever according to the same doctrine mentioned before. Here, I'm not going into the details of pseudo-symbolism and inversion of symbols, which is also the title of a chapter of a book written by the French metaphysician René Guénon, named The Reign of Quantity and Signs of the Time. But what is the non-symbolist perception of symbols? It is, in fact, regarding symbols as standing for nothing beyond the nearest meaning that comes to the mind. Also, a sort of the non-symbolist approach is to understand symbols as mere allegories with no existential connection to what is supposed as their meanings. Thus, they can be interpreted regardless what the intention is behind the symbols. It is from here that arise individual interpretations that do not have fundamentally and necessarily anything in common. Now let's see how does the true man Liu Yiming criticize the non-symbolist mentality of his contemporary scholars. Since this talk has a limited time, I just mentioned the most fundamental symbol of the Taoist alchemy, which covers a widely applied example of the misinterpretations of the non-symbolist mentality. However, you can find many of these kind mentioned and refuted in the Liu Yiming's Xiangyan Pui, eliminating doubts on symbolical terminology. Human body itself might be the most frequent symbol found in the alchemical texts. Liu Yiming argues that this symbol of body represents, of course, not the physiological body or the illusory body, which is pejoratively called in accord with the Buddhist terminology as the skin bag. For him, the physiological body is in fact jiarshen, or the fake body. So let's ask, what is the true body, Zhenshen? It is indeed our primordial face, Yuan Mian Mu, or our true self, and it is never to be envisaged as something physical. It doesn't even belong to the posterior heaven, but is truly in the domain of the prior heaven. So those who haven't a symbolist mentality think that the internal alchemical process is something about regulating this physiological body, but it is the outlook that Liu Yiming opposes the most. He writes, the way of generation of a human being is to have a common father and mother, so that the illusory body can be born. But the way of generation of an immortal is to have the numinous father and the sacred mother, so that the true body can be completed. This is quoted from Liu Yiming's commentary on the Wu Zhenpian. And he explains that numinous father is the true knowledge, which is hard and active, and the sacred mother is the rational knowledge, which is soft and passive. In other words, the way of humanity is to follow the course of nature, including engaging with this body. But the way of immortality is to flow in a direction opposing the course of nature. That is, opposing the course which include macrocosmically involving with attachments of the mundane world, and microcosmically involving with the attachments of the physiological body. I should add that the true body or dharma body is something higher and subtler even than the subtle body, linga sharira, sukshma sharira of Hinduism, or sambhogakaya, Boshin of Buddhism. Well, I'll end by saying that the immortality is also to be considered as a symbol. It is not about prolonging the lifespan of this illusory body. Immortality is a station to be attained in a spiritual cultivating path, a spiritual station with no end. It is to find and realize the divine source of real life. And this source is nothing but Tao. Also, this conception of immortality isn't far from the highest station in Sufism, the station of subsistence, maqam al-baqa. To summarize, there is a slight apparent difference between naturalism and natural symbolism. But this apparently small difference of having or not having symbolist mentality makes huge differences in consequences, even to the point of reducing a highly spiritual tradition to a materialistic one in a modern non-orthodox view. Thank you so much for your attention. Ya Haq.